Young Martyr has a crap ton of wacky lore. Young Martyr was daughter of a jałupnik, meaning cottage dwelling, peasant family in the west of the Kingdom of Poland. She was born on October 5th, 1129, and the name she was given at baptism was Adwiga. In 1143, when she was 14, she was sent off by her family to Farac in France to join a newly founded congregation of Cistercian nuns. This was at the behest of a band of Cistercian monks who had traveled to their area from the Holy Roman Empire. She took the name Claire Marguerite de la Croix upon arrival in France at the community, but she still was called Adwiga by many. When she was 17, in the spring of 1146, she and several nuns from her community were given the permission to leave their cloister to travel with Saint Bernard of Clairvaux to Vézelay, France, as he was called by King Louis VII and his wife Eleanor of Aquitaine, to preach there in support of a crusade. When Saint Bernard delivered his sermon, Eleanor quote-unquote took the cross, which means she decided she herself would join the crusade. Adwiga and the other women from the Cistercian community that came with her decided that they too should join the crusade alongside Eleanor. After a year of speaking with their superiors, and with the persuasive help of Saint Bernard, they were allowed to go. At the time, Adwiga was a novice in the Cistercian order. In June of 1147, they, along with an army of crusaders, pilgrims, and most importantly, King Louis and Eleanor, set off for the Holy Land. By late that year, they reached Constantinople, and by December of that year, they reached Ephesus in Asia Minor. Now the story becomes more detailed. As the Crusaders and Pilgrims were camping near Ephesus at the beginning of January, Adwiga retreated a ways away from the camp at twilight, having seen a feline-like creature who wore a medal around their neck. It was looking at her as she prepared to sleep. She followed the feline, carrying with her nothing more than her sword, a small censer, her highly valuable copy of the Vulgate Bible, and a torch. She wore her helm on her head, gifted to her by a blacksmith in Saint-Denis back in France, along with her modified habit and her veil. By the time the sky became completely dark, the feline reached a stunning church, seemingly a cathedral, where it stopped at the doors. Inside, the walls were decked with images of the Virgin Mary and inscriptions in many languages to her. Adwiga went into the church, seeing how no one was there. She approached the edge of the sanctuary and burned some of the incense in her censer. Feeling very tired and not knowing if she could make it back to the camp before she fainted of exhaustion, she found a small corner of the church where she laid down and fell asleep. When Adwiga woke up, she found herself in a completely different place. She was on a blanket in a field. So she got up, assuming that someone who frequented the church, such as the porter, saw her and quietly moved her outside the church so that morning prayers could be said. She initially didn't notice anything wrong. The weather felt the same, and she assumed that the church was nearby. But she didn't see anything nearby. Instead, she saw a long black road with cars and trucks driving. Not knowing what these were, she walked to the road and saw that her path to the actual road was blocked by a metal fence. Adwiga followed the fence alongside the road until she reached some buildings in the middle of a field surrounded by roads. Very confused at why these buildings looked so strange. When she walked in, she noticed the air was a lot warmer than outside. The people wore clothes far different from what she had ever seen. In fact, most of her surroundings were completely foreign to her. There was a man who was standing there who seemed to have some authority, and so Adwiga asked him, in her old French, where she was. The man was very confused, not understanding anything Adwiga was saying, and he was put off by the apparel she had on. He took her to a room lit up by strange lights and tried to talk with her, but Adwiga didn't understand anything he said. After some time, he took her to his car. He made the top of the car flash red and blue lights, which frightened her, and drove her away to a larger city. All of this was overwhelming to Adwiga, but she went along with it, knowing that she could somehow communicate with these people and understand where on earth she was. Eventually, after spending time in a small room in a police station, someone who could understand Edviga, a professor who specializes in historical Romance languages, was able to communicate with her. To Edviga's immense shock, she was in a completely different time and place, an entire landmass she had never heard of, over 800 years in the future. The current year was 2016, though it was still January as it was when she was in Ephesus, and she was in the middle of Kansas, in a city called Emporia. You may think this is like a reverse Wizard of Oz situation, if you will. The police and any authority told of her story believed she was delusional and that she needed to spend time at the station so they could supervise her and inform her of reality. She ended up staying there for 5 months. By May of that year, Edviga knew very basic English, she was informed of major events since the 12th century, and learned how to use many technologies common to everyday life, except how to drive a car. She began to form a good friendship with one of the office workers at the station named Elle. In late May, Elle spoke with Edviga about how she could leave the station's watchful eyes and live in the world she now found herself in. After learning how to do this, Edviga began to fake signs of recollection, acting as if she did indeed just suffer from a delusion, and now was back to her normal 18-year-old self named Lumi from Kansas in 2016. Having given the officers the location of where she was from, Kansas City, and procured documents that the officers were not suspicious of, they allowed her to go back to her home city. They sent her off with one officer, bringing Elle along for support. Edviga and Elle were dropped off at her home, and Elle said she would help tell Lumi's parents about what happened and drop off the documents. They both walked into what was really Elle's old roommate's house. The roommate had a daughter about the same age as Edviga, who was in college, whom Edviga had recollected as being. After staying at that house for a few days, Elle and Edviga, who decided to continue to go by Lumi in this new time and place, drove to Wichita, Kansas, so she wasn't in the same city as the person she once said she was. There, Elle's daughter let Lumi live with her, and over the course of 5 years, helped Lumi learn more English, get a GED and a job, get a driver's license, and establish herself in modern society. She does act odd, which is why she is called, quote, totally autistic like for real. For as long as Edviga / Claire Marguerite Delacroix / Lumi remained in time since 2016, she has rarely, if ever, let others know about her past, out of fear of either the authorities finding her again, or the person she's talking to thinking she has something wrong with her head. Young Martyr, which is the stage name she took upon joining Flex, makes music about her past in the Middle Ages, as well as life in the modern age. She didn't realize, however, upon making this video and putting it on the internet, that she's exposing her past because she's a dummy.